Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Eric Severide in Washington, Ike Pappas in Berkeley, Bert Quint in Saigon, Robert Shackney in Quito, Ecuador, Peter Kalisher in Paris, Bill Plant in Indianapolis, and Hal Walker in Washington.
Good evening. The feared confrontation between supporters of the People's Park in Berkeley and the police so far looks pretty much like a love-in. Ike Pappas has the story.
The story of the big Memorial Day March in Berkeley begins not only in the streets of the city, but on its rooftops. Some sheriff's police were served breakfast this morning as they took their positions on rooftops overlooking the line of march. They were armed not only with shotguns, but some were carrying high-powered sniper rifles with scopes. Their ammunition was lightweight birdshot, but according to Alameda County Sheriff Frank Madigan, they were prepared to use more lethal buckshot if riot conditions developed. But march leaders said their stroll this Memorial Day was designed to be peaceful, and even as the marchers assembled at a vacant lot near the campus that's been dubbed Insurrection City for today, their mood appeared conciliatory, following the adoption of a compromise plan by the city council that would turn at least part of the property over to a community park. The assembly area today was dedicated to James Rector, the youth who was shot, according to witnesses, by sheriff's police during Bloody Thursday over 2 weeks ago. Rector died of his wounds and became the martyr of the People's Park cause. As the crowds grew in size, police and National Guardsmen prepared for their arrival at the university-owned piece of land that the marchers demand must be theirs for a community park. Guards cleared the area around the land and placed barbed wire. About an hour before a scheduled noon rally, National Guardsmen with fixed bayonets took up positions at intersections to keep demonstrators from departing from their authorized route. After a rally that featured speeches pegged to change of the American social structure and other revolutionary topics, the marchers, motorized and otherwise, lined up to move out. Estimates of the number of participants ranged as high as 20,000. The slogan of the day, according to the march leaders, was "Pigs out of the park," the object to surround the university property with thousands of people and demand that the steel cyclone fence surrounding it be taken down. But the first marchers moved past the property and headed back to the assembly point, and though some attempted to plant flowers outside the fence, the early stages of the march at least appeared peaceful. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Berkeley.
You send your bras to the laundry?
Why not? They're Playtex living bras. Yes, in commercial laundry tests, Playtex living bras were washed under the toughest conditions in industrial detergent and bleach. Even after 50 machine washings, side stretch this way, every way. Still stretches like new.
Do they still fit?
Perfectly. So comfortable, too. For the perfect fit you can't wash out, Playtex living bra.
That's the hard way to be firm and flatter. The easy way, the firm and flatter Lycra girdle by Playtex. Firms and flatters as no other girdle can. The exclusive V construction exercises two firming, flattering forces. These elastic V bands lift your tummy in. These elastic bands keep your waistline thin. You're firmer, you're flatter in the Playtex firm and flatter girdle made with Lycra.
Senator Edward Kennedy, who recently criticized the Hamburger Hill action in Vietnam as irresponsible, today resumed his attack on the war. Kennedy, a member of the advisory board of Emmanuel College, addressed graduates of that girls' school in Boston. Cardinal Cushing was at his side.
Education itself used to belong to the privileged few. Today, 7 million young people are attending college. And in 1976, 10 million will attend. It is precisely because these young people are more aware, more committed, and in many ways more mature, that they are so concerned about the worst in our nation. Above all else, they ask why, after 4 fruitless years, and after all the lessons we have learned, all the lives we have lost, all the promises we have heard, they ask why we must conduct the same kind of senseless military action in the hills and valleys of Vietnam. Actions that do not contribute to what we are doing in Paris, in which delay the day of successful negotiations. And if we love our country, we love it not just for what it has done, but for what it can be. We love not just part of it, but all of it. We love it too much to let these injustices occur without doing whatever we can to improve them. So I'm not disturbed by the disillusion and the dissent. They are healthy. I'm disturbed by those young people who, with the benefit of an education, decide to tune out.
Army Captain Brendan Sullivan said today that he does not regard his orders to Vietnam as reprisal for his role as a defense counsel in the Presidio Mutiny Court-Martial. Two senators, noting that Sullivan has only 7 months left to serve, have asked the Army for a full report on the assignment. Sullivan said he believes their inquiry should be fully answered to remove even the appearance that he's being punished and to make clear that military lawyers have freedom of action in court-martial defenses. In South Vietnam, the U.S. command accused the Viet Cong of 34 violations in the first 8 hours of the Buddha birthday ceasefire. 2 Americans were killed and 18 wounded in the incidents. The guerrillas, in turn, charged that American planes carried out numerous bombing raids during the truce period. Military sources in Saigon reported that a helicopter today picked up an American soldier who was captured by the Viet Cong last August. He was found near the Cambodian border, but there was no immediate word on whether he escaped from the Viet Cong or was released by them. South Vietnam's President Thieu today flew from South Korea to Formosa, where Chiang Kai-shek hailed him as a courageous fighter against communism. The significant phase of Thieu's tour comes June 8th, when he meets President Nixon on Midway Island. And we have a background report on Thieu's approach to that conference from CBS News correspondent Bert Quint in Saigon.
Nguyen Van Thieu has taken a big gamble in pushing for a face-down with President Nixon. But it's a gamble that the South Vietnamese leader felt compelled to take. Sources close to President Thieu have told CBS News that he is under political pressure from his own collaborators, including Vice President Ky and Prime Minister Hung, to defy what looks to them like the beginning of an American sellout. Ky, Hung, and others suspect that Mr. Nixon really is prepared to go along with the communist demand that a coalition government be established to rule South Vietnam in place of the present regime. Thieu, who refers to these men as alarmists, has tried to convince them that Mr. Nixon's recent hints about a coalition were just a ploy in the negotiations, and that he is not planning to go back on the pledge that President Johnson made in Honolulu last year not to force Saigon to accept one. But according to people present during these arguments, Thieu not only was unable to convince the others of this, but he didn't seem convinced of it himself. The first order of business on Midway, as far as President Thieu is concerned, is to try to pin Mr. Nixon down to a promise that he will not negotiate the Saigon government out of existence. He reportedly plans to warn Mr. Nixon that a failure to rule out the possibility of a coalition might bring political chaos by forcing his collaborators to desert him, that the Prime Minister might resign, that a cabinet crisis could follow, and that Thieu's newly formed political alliance might crumble under charges that Thieu is an American puppet. This shapes up as Thieu's argument, and some of these things could happen. In any case, it is a decisive moment. Thieu has been strong, his position is weakened because of the threat that his regime might be forced out. If he comes back from Midway without reassurances that it won't, the muted rumblings of suspicion will grow louder. Bert Quint, CBS News, Saigon.
President Nixon called Secretary of State Rogers to Key Biscayne today to report on Rogers' recent meeting with President Thieu. Mr. Nixon spending a working holiday at Key Biscayne with his family. Today, daughter Julie and her husband David Eisenhower went golfing with the Nixons' friend and neighbor, Bibi Raboso. A budget hearing analysis says federal spending would have to be tripled to overcome hunger in America. Food programs now cost about $1.5 billion a year, and the analysis estimates that almost $3 billion more is needed to provide an adequate diet for the 21 million Americans in poverty.
Would you like to know the inside story on all the major pain relievers you see advertised? It's aspirin.
Inside every single leading pain reliever is the same major ingredient, aspirin. Look at the list of ingredients on the different packages. Every one of those products relies chiefly on aspirin.
Surprised? But don't be. After all, aspirin is the only pain reliever doctors overwhelmingly recommend for nearly every type of ache or pain.
And did you know that Bayer is the only one of those pain relievers that makes all its own aspirin? With care and experience no one else can match.
That's why pure Bayer aspirin, without buffering or caffeine or any other extra ingredient, is a pain reliever for you. That's been the inside story on pain relievers for 50 years.
Why hasn't the story ever changed? It's simple. Bayer is just ahead of its time.
In Quito, Ecuador, the activities of presidential envoy Nelson Rockefeller were kept secret today. Authorities wanted to avoid a repetition of yesterday's anti-American demonstrations triggered by the New York governor's arrival. Robert Shackney reports on that outburst.
When a high-level North American mission visits Latin America, anti-Yankee student demonstrations are absolutely predictable. But here in Quito, the capital of Ecuador, the demonstration got a lot closer than it ever has before to Governor Rockefeller and members of his mission. Police had to use tear gas, and they used it repeatedly to clear the narrow streets and plazas around the presidential palace, which was to be the first stop for the visiting dignitaries. If Governor Rockefeller was concerned about the demonstrations, he gave no visible sign of it. But his people were worried. His motorcade took a circuitous, unpublished route through town to get to the palace. There was a truckload of armed soldiers riding escort. And the governor's party got a full whiff of tear gas as it rode through streets that had just been cleared of demonstrators. It's possible that Ecuadorian President Dr. Jose Maria Velasco Ibarra and Governor Rockefeller, as they talked, could hear the sound of gas grenades exploding just outside the palace. He wants more United States aid and special trade advantages in the United States market. But the quiet, cordial talks inside seemed beside the point in the street violence outside. As these things go, this wasn't a very big demonstration, and up to this point, not excessively violent. It's estimated that only about 1,000 students, a tiny minority, started the trouble. A Rockefeller mission is a natural target for the anti-Yankee students. And once a demonstration starts, there's no telling how far it is going to go. Governments in this part of the world have toppled because of students in the streets. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Quito, Ecuador.
Argentina was all but paralyzed by a general strike today, and there was more violence in the industrial city of Cordova. At least 5 persons were wounded in exchanges between snipers and regular army troops. Anti-government demonstrations have been going on in Argentina for 3 weeks now, and 10 persons have died in them. And there was labor violence in the Dutch Caribbean island of Curaçao today. Striking oil refinery workers demanding higher pay marched into the city of Willemstad and burned and looted several stores. In the ensuing battle with police, 8 persons were wounded, including a labor leader. On Sunday, the French people are going to vote for a president, and the outcome then, or in a runoff 2 weeks later, could produce some major changes from the foreign policy of the de Gaulle era. We have a report from CBS News correspondent Peter Kalischer.
This is the rear view of a front-running candidate in the French presidential elections. It's the way his rivals would like to see interim President Alain Poher exit from the scene. In the poster battle, Poher is a loser. This one, a visual nude pun on the American musical Hair, soon to open here, claims he is the most daring nothing in Paris. Another that he will remain an interim president only. That's all anybody thought this anti-Gaullist man of the center had a chance to be when, as president of the French Senate, he constitutionally followed de Gaulle into the Elysee Palace and then became one of 7 announced candidates for the 7-year term. There's Alain Krivine, the young Trotskyist darling of the militant students and the ultra-radicals. He's slated to get only a fraction of the votes cast on Sunday. There's independent millionaire Louis Ducatel, who says he's above parties. There's unified socialist Michel Rocard, a man far out in left field with a following of students and intellectuals. It's 72-year-old Jacques Duclos, the Communist Party candidate, who is expected to get the lion's share of the leftist electorate, and where the communist vote goes on the second round may decide who is president. Moderate socialist Gaston Defferre, the mayor of Marseille, is a man who wins duels but loses presidential elections. The biggest single block of votes, about 40%, is expected to go to Georges Pompidou, de Gaulle's former prime minister, the man who inherited his political machine, his foreign policy of détente with the East, and all the assets and liabilities of 11 years of Gaullism. But that's it. After more than a decade of grandeur, the average Frenchman may be looking for an average Frenchman, and 60-year-old Alain Poher, a former mining engineer, may be the one. His news conferences like this one are the antithesis of the planted question ritual so dear to de Gaulle. Like Pompidou, Poher is driving down the middle of the road. But he is promising more change and less continuity, lower taxes by cutting military spending, a chance for Britain to get into the common market, a neutral foreign policy in the Middle East, a strong united Europe tied to the Atlantic Alliance. No candidate is expected to get an outright majority on Sunday, thus forcing a runoff vote on June 15th. That race will almost certainly be between Pompidou and Poher, which ensures for France perhaps not stability, but certainly moderation. Peter Kalischer, CBS News, Paris.
For more than a decade, it was West Germany's policy to break diplomatic relations with nations recognizing communist East Germany. But today, the Bonn government said that policy no longer would be automatic. What brought on that decision was Cambodia's recent recognition of East Germany. The West German cabinet delayed a decision on what action it will take in Cambodia's case. A storm of controversy has arisen over England's third heart transplant. In London, it's been revealed that a machine keeping a donor's heart beating was switched off for the transplant. The donor was a student nurse brought to the hospital after injuries suffered in a motorcycle accident. 2 doctors decided she had no chance to recover. They disconnected the machine, which kept her heart beating, and transplanted the heart to the body of a 59-year-old man, now reported in good condition. Senior surgeons at Guy's Hospital argue that the girl was clinically dead before the transplant, but an instructor in experimental surgery said what they did was euthanasia. Why try to con the public? 4 British explorers today reached land after history's first crossing of the frozen Arctic Ocean. They set out from Point Barrow, Alaska, 476 days ago, and arrived in the area of Spitsbergen, a group of islands belonging to Norway.
What a good time. What a good time. What a good time for a kid. Catching sunbeams or dodging raindrops, looking for rainbows high on the hilltop, and suddenly, suspended in space, the top of the world is our special place, where we play. What a good time. The good taste of Kent was meant for a day like today.
Hey, can you think of a better time than right now for the good time taste of a Kent cigarette? Millions of Kent smokers will tell you they just don't make them any better tasting. So how about it?
What a good time for a Kent.
This is the 102nd observance of Memorial Day, originally set aside to remember those Americans who died in an American war. It's estimated that more than 650 Americans will lose their lives in traffic accidents this weekend, but the latest report says that we are nearly doubling last year's rate on which this year's predictions are based. We measure it as a matter of numbers, as though we were reading statistics on the stock exchange, which, by the way, is closed today. For those 6 persons who died in a collision near Doswell, Virginia, the 3 women dead in a 2-car crack-up near Jackson, Michigan, the 5 dead when a camper and a truck collided near Heflin, Alabama, represent an irony. For all those who die on the highways this weekend, of memory will surely have given their lives in vain. It may be that on Memorial Day, the only persons allowed behind the wheel of the car should be on the track at Indianapolis. And for what happened there, let's go to Bill Plant.
Start your engine.
Monroe, A.J. Foyt, number 6, on the pole position. Mario Andretti, number 2, and last year's winner, Bobby Unser, number 1. Nearly 300,000 people sat in 80-degree heat under a blazing sun for this annual spring rite of speed and danger. The pace car led the 33 starters once around. Only 13 of them were able to finish the race. After some of the fastest qualifying speeds on record, officials expected this to be one of the fastest fields in the history of the track, and it was. After the green flag was out, speed records were broken at nearly every mile marker. A.J. Foyt in number 6 took the lead from Andretti after the first few laps and held it until nearly the halfway point when he began to have trouble, and Andretti in number 2 began catching up. Despite the high temperatures on the track, this was a relatively safe race. The one spectacular mishap was Jim McElreath's flaming run down the main straightaway after 24 laps. McElreath stopped at the first turn and jumped to safety. With this and one other near miss, the yellow caution flag was out for only 14 minutes during the race. After 107 laps and 2 brief challenges, Andretti was back in front and held his lead easily to the end, setting a track speed record of 156.867 miles per hour. Into the winner's circle after 4 previous tries, Andretti and his teammates stand to share top money prizes of about $185,000. The Festival Queen was waiting to kiss Andretti, but exuberant Andy Granatelli, owner of the Turbo Ford racer, got there first. Then he hoisted Andretti onto his shoulders. Their victory made all the sweeter because they have tried so often and because of the accident 9 days ago in which Andretti was burned and his original racer demolished. Bill Plant, CBS News, Indianapolis.
Dan Gurney finished second, and Bobby Unser, last year's winner, finished third, which is still better than a good many American motorists fared today. In Washington, D.C., today, the son of a Negro congressman married a socialite whose ancestors include Miles Standish and 2 founders of the Rhode Island colony. Hal Walker reports.
The Washington National Cathedral is a standard setting for the ceremonies of very important people. And so it was natural that Adam Clayton Powell III and socially prominent Beryl Slocum should choose it for their exchange of vows and for the wedding of 2 families of such diverse backgrounds. Washington and Newport Society contributed to the guest list of more than 150 persons. Neither the bride's mother, Mrs. John Slocum, nor the groom's mother, pianist Hazel Scott, would admit that she cried during the 12-minute ceremony. They both described the day as perfectly beautiful. And the groom's father, dressed in clerical garb, later talked briefly with reporters as he left the church for the reception.
Have you any regrets? One of those stories of not losing a son but gaining a daughter?
Well, that's not a regret, baby. That's 2 for 1.
The couple will now honeymoon in Europe, stopping in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and in Moscow. Young Powell, a news producer himself, has said that Moscow is the only place he feels he can get away from reporters. Hal Walker, CBS News, Washington.
Comedian George Jessel said it when he introduced the man. Once there was a Jew and an Irishman, and here he is. The man was Robert Briscoe, the only Jew ever elected Lord Mayor of Dublin. They called this son of a Lithuanian immigrant the fabulous Irishman when he was first elected to his post in 1956 in that overwhelmingly Roman Catholic nation. He was pro-American, and Americans loved him on his visits to this nation. 2 of his daughters converted to the Catholic faith. 1 became a Carmelite nun. Robert Briscoe died today in his Dublin home at the age of 74.
Introducing the French fried potato crisp. It's kind of like the best part of the French fry, which is the taste of the fry, and the best part of the potato chip, the crunch. Now, if your mouth likes the French fried potato crisp, you will too.
This is Zoller & Son, the most successful sign painters in town. They're so busy they seldom find time to stop for lunch. Result? Zoller & Son have a vitamin gap.
What's a mother to do?
Serve Total, the vitamin cereal. 1 bowl, 1 ounce of Total, has 100% of every minimum daily adult vitamin requirement set by the U.S. government. Even for businessmen too busy to eat. Total fills the vitamin gap. Deliciously.
To Washington now, and Eric Severide for some thoughts about Memorial Day, Americans, and war. Eric?
This is the appointed day for remembering those grandfathers, fathers, husbands, and sons who died abruptly and too soon. It is a difficult Memorial Day. The sun shines over most of the country, making the present that much more real than the past. a holiday for most, not a vigil, a holiday that will become, in life's illogical way, a sober Memorial Day for the families of the 600 or so who will die abruptly and too soon behind a steering wheel instead of a gun. And it is difficult to think of soldier heroes when so many are soldiers again in a war without glory, where the bravest are heroes only to their immediate comrades, unacknowledged by their country at large. This is fairly surely the most disliked, unbelieved in war Americans have ever fought, so its deaths are doubly bitter. We do not readily take to the role of world policemen. Geopolitical reasoning does not move us very much. We make poor imperialists. We comprehend the word citizen, not the word subject. So we fight and leave the conquest behind, whether it be Europe or Japan or Vietnam, which we will one day surely leave. There is something in us that insists our wars be moral crusades, and when the morality of the fighting is not clear and obvious, rebellious protest spreads across the land. That was the case in the Mexican War, in the war against the Filipino insurrectionists, in the latter stages of the Korean War, and it's the case today. Much worse now because this one has dragged on and on while the others were rather quickly over. Only the two world wars of this century found Americans essentially united. So anyone who visits the combat soldiers in Vietnam confronts a humbling mystery. Young Americans fighting not for glory, not for booty, not because their own land is directly threatened, not out of passion, living the worst life they have ever lived, while most of their countrymen, including most of their youthful peers, live the best life they have ever lived. But they do not quit. They climb the deadly hill again. This spectacle does not yield to logic, or reason, or even common sense, but somehow it evokes in all who see it a profound respect. On this special day, not all our thoughts must be of the past or even the present. There are now sound reasons for thinking ahead and with more than hope, with belief. The conviction deepens in this capital that the war will begin to die away in the months ahead, and that Memorial Day 1 year hence will have a different tone and spirit. Walter?
And that's the way it is. Friday, May 30th, 1969. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Manor Hall latex flat enamel. A bright new idea from Pittsburgh Paints.
Family room, artichoke.
One paint for every room.
Kitchen, frosted orange.
Every surface of your house.
Dining room, icicle.
Manor Hall paint.
Living room, honeydew. Laundry, French vanilla. Center hall, gold green.
Colors so rich, so durable, they stay as fresh as the day you painted them. In an armor-like finish so strong that dirt cannot penetrate. Therefore, it's easier to wash, easier to maintain. Pittsburgh Paints set out to make the finest paint ever. Manor Hall paint. It costs more, but isn't your house worth it?
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.